In the heart of Milan, where the cobblestone streets buzzed with the energy of the late 15th century, a figure moved through the throng with an air of quiet purpose. His hands bore the telltale smudges of charcoal, and a weathered leather satchel hung loosely over his shoulder, brimming with parchment and tools of creation. This was no ordinary man. This was Leonardo da Vinci, the enigmatic soul whose mind danced between the realms of art and science, laboring in secret on a masterpiece commissioned by the formidable Duke Ludovico Sforza. Yet, not far from where he stood, a pair of sharp eyes followed his every move, glinting with disdain and cloaked in arrogance. That gaze belonged to Matteo Rossi, a wealthy merchant whose greed knew no bounds, and whose next encounter with Leonardo would unravel in a way that would leave the city of Milan utterly speechless, forever altering the course of one man's life. Before we plunge into this extraordinary tale, we'd love to know where you're watching from. If stories like this ignite your curiosity, subscribe to the channel, for tomorrow brings another captivating chapter from the life of Leonardo's unparalleled genius. The Milanese fair unfolded like a vibrant tapestry, its threads woven with the clamor of merchants haggling over silks and spices, the rhythmic clatter of coins exchanging hands, and the proud display of artworks that drew gasps from the crowd. Nobles strutted in their finest attire, silk gowns shimmering under the midday sun, jewels catching the light with every calculated step, while artists vied for attention with canvases and sculptures. Amid this whirlwind of extravagance, Leonardo stood near a modest wooden stall, his focus unwavering as his quill danced across a sheet of parchment. His robe, a simple garment of muted brown, hung loosely on his frame, its edges frayed from years of use. His long hair, streaked with the gray of wisdom, was tied back with a leather cord, and his face bore the lines of a man who had seen both triumph and struggle. There was nothing ostentatious about him, nothing to suggest he belonged among the gilded elite, and yet, those who paused to truly look could sense something extraordinary, a quiet brilliance that radiated from his steady hands and thoughtful gaze. He worked on a canvas partially obscured by cloth, its edges peeking out just enough to tease the imagination of those who passed by, hinting at a mystery yet to be unveiled. Across the square, Matteo Rossi observed this scene with a sneer that twisted his otherwise handsome features. A merchant of considerable wealth, Matteo had built his fortune by purchasing cheap artworks from struggling artists, polishing them with false provenance, and selling them to unsuspecting nobles for exorbitant sums. His velvet cloak, trimmed with rich fur, billowed slightly as he moved, and his fingers, heavy with gold rings, gleamed with every gesture. His sharp eyes, accustomed to sizing up both goods and people, landed on Leonardo, and a scoff escaped his lips. "What's this?" he muttered, his voice laced with mockery as he strode forward, his boots clicking against the stone. A beggar with a brush, daring to sully the Milanese fair with his pitiful scribbles? Florence might tolerate such charlatans, but Milan has standards. His words carried across the square, drawing the attention of nearby vendors and onlookers, who turned to watch the unfolding drama with a mix of curiosity and amusement. Leonardo lifted his gaze from his work, his dark eyes meeting Matteo's with a serenity that seemed to cut through the merchant's bravado like a blade through silk. For a moment, the world around them faded. The chatter of the crowd, the jingle of coins, the rustle of fabric, all reduced to a hush as their eyes locked. "The world is full of beauty, signore," Leonardo replied, his voice soft yet resonant, as he returned to his sketching with deliberate strokes. "If you take the time to look." Matteo's face flushed with a sudden heat, his jaw tightening as he processed the response. He had anticipated a retort, a defensive outburst, perhaps even a plea for mercy. Anything but this unshakable calm that seemed to mock his authority. "Beauty," he sneered, raising his voice to ensure the growing crowd could hear. "All I see is a man wasting time on childish dreams. Real art requires wealth, power, and the patronage of men like me, not rags and charcoal in some dusty corner." The air around the stall thickened with tension as the crowd murmured, their opinions splitting like a river around a stone. Some nodded in agreement with Matteo, their own prejudices aligning with his words, while others tilted their heads, intrigued by the quiet dignity of the artist before them. Matteo seized the opportunity, stepping closer until his shadow fell across Leonardo's parchment. "I challenge you, stranger," he declared, his tone dripping with challenge as he spread his arms wide. "Show us something worthy of this fair, or pack your things and leave Milan forever. Prove you're more than a pauper with a pencil, or I'll see to it that your name is forgotten." The crowd gasped, some stepping back, others leaning in, their anticipation palpable. Leonardo paused, his quill hovering above the parchment, the faint scratch of charcoal silenced for a heartbeat. Then, with a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips, he met Matteo's gaze once more. "Very well," he said, his voice steady and unyielding. "Let's see what time reveals." The words hung in the air like a promise, a challenge wrapped in mystery that sent a ripple through the onlookers. Matteo's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickering in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with a haughty laugh. "Time," he echoed, crossing his arms. "We'll see how long your delusions last, artist. I'll give you a week to prove your worth, or I'll buy your little scribbles for a pittance and burn them myself." The crowd erupted into whispers, some shocked by the merchant's boldness, others intrigued by the artist's calm acceptance. Leonardo inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging the stakes, and returned to his work, his hands moving with a grace that belied the storm brewing around him. The cloth over his canvas shifted slightly in the breeze, revealing a glimpse of bold strokes and shadowy figures, but no one could yet discern its meaning. As the fair continued, the tension between the two men became the talk of the square. Vendors leaned over their stalls to catch snippets of conversation. Nobles cast sidelong glances, and children darted through the crowd, spreading the tale of the artist and the merchant's duel. Matteo strutted away, his cloak swirling behind him, confident that he had asserted his dominance. Yet, in his wake, Leonardo remained at his stall, his focus unbroken, his mind already weaving the threads of a plan that would turn the merchant's arrogance into his own undoing. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, and with each passing hour, the anticipation grew. What would Leonardo unveil? Could a man of such humble appearance truly rival the wealth and status of Matteo Rossi? The questions lingered, unanswered, as the first day of their challenge drew to a close. In the days that followed, Leonardo worked in secrecy, his stall becoming a point of pilgrimage for those curious enough to brave Matteo's watchful eye. The merchant, for his part, reveled in the attention, boasting to anyone who would listen about how he would crush this upstart artist and claim another victory for his collection. Yet, beneath his bravado, a seed of doubt had been planted. Leonardo's calm demeanor, his refusal to rise to the bait, gnawed at Matteo's confidence. He began to visit the fair more often, lingering near Leonardo's stall, his sharp eyes searching for any sign of weakness. But Leonardo gave him nothing, only the steady scratch of charcoal, the occasional rustle of parchment, and that same enigmatic smile that seemed to hold secrets beyond Matteo's reach. The crowd, too, began to take sides. Some sided with Matteo, their loyalty bought by his wealth and promises of favor, while others whispered of Leonardo's reputation, tales of his sketches for flying machines, his studies of the human body, his paintings that seemed to breathe with life. The air was thick with speculation, and by the eve of the week's end, the fairgrounds buzzed with excitement. Word had spread beyond Milan, drawing travelers and artists from neighboring towns, all eager to witness the showdown between the humble genius and the arrogant merchant. Matteo, sensing the growing interest, doubled down on his taunts, commissioning a lavish banner to proclaim his victory before it was even won. Leonardo, meanwhile, worked late into the night, the flicker of a single candle illuminating his canvas as he added the final touches to his creation. As the appointed day dawned, the fairground transformed into a theater of anticipation. Stalls were pushed aside to make way for a makeshift stage, and a throng of people gathered, their voices a cacophony of excitement and doubt. Matteo arrived in a flourish, his cloak billowing, his chest puffed with pride, surrounded by a retinue of sycophants who echoed his every word. Leonardo, by contrast, approached alone, his satchel over his shoulder, his robe dusted with the remnants of his labor. The crowd parted for him, their eyes wide with curiosity, and Matteo stepped forward, his smirk wide and triumphant. "The time has come, artist," he proclaimed, his voice carrying over the murmurs. "Show us your masterpiece, or admit defeat and leave Milan in shame." Leonardo set his satchel down with a gentle thud, his movements deliberate as he withdrew the cloth-covered canvas. The crowd leaned in, their breaths held collectively as he unveiled his work. At first glance, it appeared as a chaotic jumble of strokes, dark shadows, indistinct figures, and smears of color that seemed incomplete. Matteo let out a loud laugh, clapping his hands in mock delight. "Is this your great work?" he jeered, turning to the crowd. "A child's doodle? I'll buy it for a single florin and use it to wrap my fish." The onlookers chuckled nervously, some shaking their heads, others exchanging glances of disappointment. Leonardo remained silent, his expression unchanged, as if the mockery washed over him like a gentle breeze. But then, with a subtle gesture, Leonardo tilted the canvas slightly, adjusting its angle to catch the morning light. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the shadows shifted, revealing hidden details, faint outlines of apostles, the tender expression of Christ, the architectural precision of a vanishing point. The painting began to take shape, its beauty unfolding like a flower in bloom. Matteo's laughter died in his throat, his eyes widening as recognition dawned. This was no mere sketch. This was the beginnings of The Last Supper, a work of such genius that it would one day adorn the walls of Santa Maria del Grazie. The crowd fell silent, their awe palpable, as Leonardo stepped back, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the merchant's stunned disbelief. "To be continued," Leonardo's voice broke the silence, soft but firm, as he covered the canvas once more. The crowd erupted into whispers, their minds racing with questions. Matteo stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly, his arrogance shattered by the revelation. What had begun as a simple challenge had spiraled into something far greater, and the merchant knew that the days ahead would test everything he believed about art, power, and worth. As the fair dispersed, Leonardo packed his things with the same quiet grace, his eyes twinkling with the knowledge of what was yet to come. The stage was set, and the world would soon witness the true measure of a genius, and the humbling of a man who thought he could buy it. The sun dipped low over the Milanese fairground, casting a golden glow across the cobblestone square as the second day of the challenge dawned. The air buzzed with anticipation, the crowd larger than before, drawn by whispers of the mysterious artist who had dared to stand against the formidable Matteo Rossi. Leonardo da Vinci stood beside his modest stall, his weathered hands carefully arranging his tools. Charcoal sticks, a quill, and a few sheets of parchment, while the cloth-covered canvas rested against the wooden frame, its secrets still hidden from view. His simple robe, dusted with the remnants of his late-night labor, stood in stark contrast to the opulence around him. Yet there was an unshakable dignity in his posture, a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from within. The crowd watched him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, their voices a low hum as they speculated about what the day would bring. Matteo Rossi arrived with the pomp of a conquering hero, his velvet cloak shimmering in the evening light, his retinue of sycophants trailing behind him like shadows. His gold rings glinted as he waved dismissively at the onlookers, his sharp eyes locking onto Leonardo with a predatory gleam. The merchant had spent the past day boasting to anyone who would listen, proclaiming that he would expose the artist as a fraud and claim another victory for his ever-growing collection of ill-gotten treasures. "Let's see what this beggar has conjured up overnight," Matteo announced, his voice booming across the square as he strode toward Leonardo's stall. "I hope you've packed your bags, artist, because Milan has no patience for pretenders." Leonardo lifted his gaze, his dark eyes meeting Matteo's with the same serene intensity that had unsettled the merchant the day before. For a moment, the crowd held its breath, sensing the tension crackling between the two men like a storm about to break. "I prepared what you asked for, Signore," Leonardo replied, his voice soft but steady as he gestured toward the covered canvas. "But I wonder if you're truly ready to see it." Matteo's smirk widened, though a flicker of unease danced in his eyes. He had expected Leonardo to crumble under the pressure, to flee in the night or beg for mercy. But the artist's calm demeanor gnawed at his confidence like a persistent thorn. With a theatrical flourish, Matteo stepped forward, his cloak billowing behind him as he addressed the crowd. "This man claims to be an artist, but all I see is a dreamer with no place among us," he declared, his words dripping with mockery. "Let's humor him, shall we? Unveil your so-called masterpiece, and I'll decide if it's worth the dirt on my boots." The crowd murmured, some laughing at Matteo's taunt, others shifting uncomfortably, their curiosity piqued by Leonardo's unwavering composure. Leonardo inclined his head slightly, as if acknowledging the challenge, and reached for the cloth covering his canvas. The fabric fell away with a gentle rustle, revealing the same chaotic jumble of strokes that had been glimpsed the day before. Dark shadows, indistinct figures, and smears of color that seemed to lack coherence or purpose. A ripple of disappointment passed through the crowd, their murmurs turning to whispers of doubt. Matteo threw his head back and laughed, the sound harsh and grating against the stillness of the square. This is your masterpiece," he exclaimed, clapping his hands in mock delight. "It looks like the work of a child who's spilled his paint. I've seen better art on the walls of a stable." The crowd chuckled nervously, some nodding in agreement, while others exchanged glances, unsure what to make of the strange piece before them. A young woman in the back frowned, tilting her head as if trying to discern some hidden meaning, but Matteo's voice drowned out any chance for contemplation. "You've wasted our time, artist," he sneered, stepping closer to Leonardo. "But I'm a generous man. I'll buy this mess for a single florin. Consider it charity to keep Milan streets free of riffraff like you." Leonardo remained silent, his expression unchanged, as if the merchant's words were nothing more than the buzzing of a fly. He folded the cloth in his hands with deliberate care, his movements slow and precise, before meeting Matteo's gaze once more. "A florin, you say?" he asked, his tone as calm as a still lake. "Very well, but I have one condition." Matteo raised an eyebrow, his smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. "A condition? You're in no position to make demands, beggar," he snapped, though his voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Leonardo's lips curved into a faint smile, one that held the weight of secrets yet to be revealed. "Show the piece publicly in 1 week's time," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "Let the people of Milan decide its worth. If they deem it unworthy, I'll leave the city as you wish." The crowd gasped, their whispers growing louder as they absorbed Leonardo's words. Matteo hesitated, his sharp mind racing to uncover any hidden trap in the artist's proposal. But the prospect of publicly humiliating Leonardo and profiting from it was too tempting to resist. "Done," he declared, tossing a single florin onto the stall with a flick of his wrist. The coin landed with a dull clink, its meager value a stark contrast to the merchant's lavish attire. "In 1 week, I'll display this garbage for all of Milan to see, and when they laugh you out of the city, I'll be there to wave you goodbye." Matteo turned to his retinue, basking in their forced laughter, while the crowd dispersed, their opinions divided. Some convinced Leonardo was a fool, others intrigued by the mystery he seemed to carry. As the fairground emptied, Leonardo packed his tools with the same quiet grace, the now-sold canvas carefully wrapped in cloth. Matteo lingered for a moment, watching the artist from a distance, his smirk fading as a nagging doubt crept into his mind. There was something in Leonardo's calm acceptance, in the way he had agreed to the deal without protest, that felt off. The merchant shook his head, dismissing the thought as he turned away, his cloak swirling behind him. He had won, he told himself. The artist was nothing more than a dreamer, and in a week's time, Milan would see him for the fraud he was. But as Matteo disappeared into the crowd, Leonardo glanced at the wrapped canvas, his eyes twinkling with the knowledge of what was to come. The painting he had sold for a single florin was far from the mess Matteo believed it to be. It was the foundation of a masterpiece that would soon shake the city to its core. The morning sun bathed the Milanese fairground in a warm, golden light, the air thick with anticipation as the crowd gathered for the final judgment of Leonardo da Vinci's mysterious canvas. The square, usually alive with the chatter of merchants and the clatter of goods, had transformed into a hushed theater, every eye fixed on the wooden stage where Matteo Rossi stood, his velvet cloak shimmering with an air of forced confidence. The merchant had spent the week boasting of his victory, parading the cloth-covered painting through the city as proof of his dominance over the humble artist. Yet beneath his smug exterior, a flicker of unease gnawed at him, a whisper of doubt planted by Leonardo's unwavering calm. Beside the stage, Leonardo da Vinci waited, his simple robe dusted with charcoal, his hands folded patiently as the crowd swelled with travelers, nobles, and curious onlookers drawn by rumors of a revelation. Matteo stepped forward, his gold rings glinting as he raised a hand to silence the murmurs. "The time has come," he declared, his voice echoing across the square. "This so-called artist sold me a pitiful scribble for a single florin, and today, Milan will see it for the fraud it is." With a dramatic flourish, he yanked the cloth from the canvas, revealing the painting that had been the subject of such scorn. At first glance, the crowd gasped. Dark shadows and smears of color met their eyes, much as they had days before. Matteo's smirk widened as he turned to the audience. "Behold a masterpiece," he jeered. "A child's mess, unworthy of this city." Laughter rippled through some, but others tilted their heads, their expressions shifting as Leonardo stepped forward, his gaze steady. "Patience, signore," Leonardo said, his voice soft yet commanding. He tilted the canvas slightly, catching the morning light at a precise angle. A collective intake of breath followed as the painting transformed before their eyes. The shadows parted like curtains, revealing the delicate outlines of the apostles, the tender expression of Christ, and the architectural precision of a vanishing point that seemed to draw the soul inward. The crowd fell silent, their awe palpable as the true nature of the work emerged. The Last Supper, a masterpiece in its early glory, its hidden details unveiled by Leonardo's genius. Matteo's laughter died in his throat, his face paling as recognition dawned. Whispers turned to gasps, and then to a roar of applause as the people of Milan realized they stood witness to something extraordinary. Matteo stumbled back, his hands trembling as he clutched the edge of the stage. This can't be," he stammered, his voice cracking. "You tricked me." Leonardo turned to him, his expression serene yet firm. "I offered you truth, not a trick," he replied. "You saw only what you wished to see, a mess to mock. But art, like life, reveals its worth in time, not in haste." The crowd nodded, some casting disapproving glances at the merchant, whose arrogance had crumbled under the weight of his own misjudgment. A young apprentice stepped forward, his eyes wide with admiration. "Master Leonardo, may I learn from you?" he asked. Leonardo smiled, nodding graciously, while Matteo watched, his confidence shattered. The merchant sank onto a nearby bench, his cloak pooling around him like a fallen banner. For the first time, he felt the sting of his own words, the emptiness of his boasts. Leonardo approached, his steps measured, and sat beside him. "Matteo," he began, his tone gentle yet profound, "wealth can buy many things, silk, gold, even art, but it cannot buy understanding. True value lies not in what you possess, but in what you give to others." Matteo's eyes dropped to his hands, the gold rings suddenly heavy. I thought success was about showing off," he murmured, "but you've shown me it's more than that." Leonardo placed a hand on his shoulder, his touch light but reassuring. "Success is a mirror," he said. It reflects not just what you build, but how you treat those around you. In your haste to judge, you missed the beauty before you. Perhaps this is a chance to start new. Matteo nodded slowly, the weight of Leonardo's words sinking deep. The crowd dispersed, their voices filled with awe and respect, leaving the merchant to sit in silence, his mind racing with the lessons of the day. As Leonardo packed his satchel, a noble approached, offering a commission for the completed Last Supper, cementing his legacy in Milan. Days later, Matteo visited Leonardo's workshop, his cloak replaced with a simpler garment, his rings fewer. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice humble. Can I learn from you? Not just art, but how to be better? Leonardo smiled, handing him a sketchbook. Knowledge is a gift to share, he said. The true measure of a man is not his wealth, but his willingness to grow. Matteo took the book, his eyes bright with a new purpose. And as he left, the echoes of Leonardo's wisdom lingered, a reminder that genius lies in humility and the courage to change. So, the next time you judge by appearances, remember Leonardo's lesson. True worth is forged in patience and kindness, not in gold or status. If this story warmed your heart, we have many more tales of Leonardo's brilliance and compassion. Click the screen to explore, and subscribe for daily stories that inspire and enlighten.